Greetings all. Good afternoon. I'm Lauren Rosen. I'm licensed. Oh my goodness. Take two. I'm Lauren Rosen. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm waiting on Kelley Franke so that we can start today's episode of Purely OCD, and we will be talking about mental compulsions. So we're glad to have you all with us. We have a number of questions that have come up. I preemptively called this part one because I do think that the likelihood is, with all the questions and the amount of hello.
Dear, it's not working.
No.
It was working fine. Just literally,
Are you sure?
listening to you.
Oh, no, it's not. No. Sucker. Well, what do you think? Do we just go for it?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
It is what it is.
No, I know. It's just frustrating because of the audio for podcast, but.
I know it is frustrating, and especially when it's like, wait, but it was just working. But glad to have you all. I know, mother sucker. So I was just telling everybody that first, welcome. I'm Lauren Rosen. This is Kelley Franke. We're Purely OCD, coming at you live on Instagram. Welcome. I was just telling everybody that I preemptively called this part one because I really do think that it's likely to need multiple episodes. So,
yes,
but because it's such a big topic.
It is. And we're coming off the heels of the local conference, OCD SoCal, and we talked about this.
We sure did.
I know you and I hadn't talked about it before this live, but I pulled up some of the definitions of mental compulsions from
Ooh. You know how to get me going. No, great. That's awesome. Maybe should we start there just by, should we start with a general definition of mental compulsions first?
Sure.
Okay. You want to have a stab at it, or shall I?
You go. Take the floor, lady.
All right.
It's all you.
So mental compulsions generally are behaviors, as probably most of you know at this point, but just in case, behaviors that are done to eliminate anxiety and doubt and discomfort that come up in the face of obsessions. And these behaviors can be a lot of different things. They can be visible, they can be avoidant, they can be reassurance seeking, they can also be mental behaviors, which the first time I heard that there was such a thing, I was like, what do you mean? Mental behavior. That's thoughts, that's different, but it's not. It's not different. That's super important because we have agency when it comes to behaviors, even though we don't when it comes to which thoughts show up in our minds.
Yeah, it's all the same whether you see it or not, because they both are serving the purpose, which is to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling. So they're also the trickiest because you can't see them. And the average person does engage in rumination, right? Like worrying about, is my car going to run out of gas because I'm on 5 miles?
Right.
Guilty.
Well, we've all been there. Or what if I get fired from my job because my boss doesn't like me?
Right.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of ways that this could manifest that have nothing to do with OCD. And in fact, we see rumination a lot in depression too. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. Like, is it ever going to get better? I'm not good enough. What are all the things I did wrong? Or is this a reflection of me? And
yeah. Yep.
So, do we want to go? Yes.
I was just going to say, but when it comes to OCD, like we were talking, like what I was saying is that it's all done to try to like figure things out. So that's really what the aim is, as with any compulsion, is to like, let's try to solve this. And this is where I think maybe we could talk about some of the different subtypes that we discussed at this weekend's conference that you had pulled up.
Yes. Okay, so we have mental avoidance or thought suppression, which I think we've all tried to do at some point. This is the don't think of the white elephant.
Mm-hmm.
The don't think about kicking the dog.
Damn it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you all just thought about it. So
It's so
it
tricky.
doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work, because in order to not think about it, you actually have to think about it.
Yep.
Like, don't think about things. No,
Right.
I just thought about it.
It happened. Too late.
It happened. It happened. One of the questions that came up a lot, like I think 2 different times, and that we talked about during the presentation this weekend, was the question of what the difference is between thought suppression and stopping ruminating, basically, which I think is such an important distinction to make. We can talk about that a little bit more later, though, because I know that's a lengthy list you've got in front of you.
Oh no, I made someone's dog cry.
Oops. Sorry. You did that with your brain, Kelley.
I did that. See?
Wow.
Because if I thought it, it made it happen.
Yeah, that's what generally happens, except for not at all.
Yeah.
Don't please hear our sarcasm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Let's just touch on it in case we forget. But thought suppression versus thought, versus like not engaging with the thought, right? So we don't want to stop the thought, but we also want to acknowledge its existence. Like, oh, hello, thought, there you are. And I'm going to keep talking to Lauren and listening to her voice and reading, yes, and reading the chats, right? So that's the goal. We don't want to say don't think about it, but like it's here, just like the sound of the white noise machine, which I'm sure you've all heard me talk about a million times because I despise that thing. But I'm making room for it.
Yeah, you are like a boss.
Right. So
well, and it was really funny. Can I bring up the example of what happened this weekend during our presentation
yes.
on?
Good
it was
one.
So brilliant, actually. So
yeah.
We're doing this presentation on the mental compulsions specifically, and we were talking about mental compulsions versus obsessions and how to tell the difference and how to navigate them differently. And this sound of a doorbell kept happening, and I guess it's something that happens with Zoom when people are entering the room. So like we're talking, and all of a sudden it's like ding dong,
ding
and
dong.
A couple seconds
it literally
later,
was ding dong the whole time.
The whole time. And so it was this really interesting sort of discussion point that we all brought up, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to accept the presence of this doorbell, but we're also not going to like wish the doorbell wasn't there the whole time, or like push it away, or spend the whole talking about the freaking doorbell. We acknowledged it. We started to laugh at it, actually, because it was humorous, but that's the thing, right? It's noticing the thought without and letting it be there without engaging with it, like acknowledging the doorbell and letting it be there without engaging with it.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It was interesting. I noticed I meant to say to you early, like after, but when the doorbell died down, I started to kind of forget about it. And then it started happening again. And I was like thrown off again, but I was faster to get unhooked from it versus like the initial. I was in the chat box, like, someone help us stop.
Stop the doorbell.
Stop the doorbell.
But that's such a good metaphor.
Yep.
Maybe you could sort of pull that apart for anyone who's listening in terms of.
Right. So when you're just going about your life and you're having a good day, let's say a good OCD day. So you're not getting a ton of intrusive thoughts lately. You're like, no, this is going pretty well. And then bam, just T-boned.
Boom.
Whew, you get thrown off harder. And so that's the metaphor is that I felt like the doorbell. I was doing okay because I was getting a lot of them, and I was like, it's just here and it's not going anywhere. But the moment you are not suspecting it, it hits you harder.
Yep, which is where relapse really comes into. Like, people think, oh, I'm relapsing.
Yep.
Because the thought came up and I immediately responded that way. But of course you did, because you're not necessarily in the practice of it, like you were saying, you know.
Yeah, you weren't expecting it.
But you have this history, and you can draw upon that, and you will likely be quicker to pivot, to turn back toward, right, the doorbell.
Yes.
There it is.
So what if this is really disturbing intrusive thought? Sarah asks. Same practice. Yes.
Yep.
Of
all
course.
Of them.
This applies across the board. So thought neutralizing.
Ooh, good one.
Is when we replace the bad thought with the good thought.
Yep.
Right?
So when you have a really disturbing thought like she's talking about, we might then respond to that by thinking something really pleasant. Like, I'm thinking of the song that I sang at the end of last year with the favorite things, but raindrops on roses, and really, that's very much I'm gonna push away this bad thought, and I'm just gonna think about these good things that, you know.
Yes. It's true. It's true. Counting doesn't just happen out loud. Turns out people count inside of their head all the time.
It's true.
It could just even be like this ritualized behavior where maybe it's just not even counting. It's just you're so used to washing our hands 3 times this way and 3 times the other way.
Yep.
Right? It's just the counting steps, counting everything.
Yeah, and a lot of the time this is tied to the idea that there are good and bad numbers. So some people will like even numbers, some will like odd numbers, some will have numbers that they're like, that I can't. So even asking them, okay, you can do your compulsion 1 time, or you can do it 3 times, even though 3 times is more. So you might think, oh, that's actually like an easier step. They might say, well, no, I won't do it 3 times because 3 is a bad number. So, you know, the counting itself is often part of this idea that we got to get to the right number.
Just right.
Got to get that click.
Yeah. Tracing and tracking. That's the wet paint.
Yeah, I love your explanation of this.
Yeah, so you're dropping the, let's say this little AirPod thing, you drop it in a bucket of wet paint, and the person, what?
As you do.
Right. Just boop, done. And the person with OCD can see all the places it's touched in the house because they're very aware. They've spent a lot of over attention and overvaluing of this object. So it's seeing all the places and points of contact and trying to totally avoid it completely.
Yeah. Yep. One thing to that end, did you ever watch the show Arrested Development?
I think I've watched maybe like a couple.
Okay. So I'm gonna share a little anecdote for anyone who's an Arrested Development fan, because there's a character on there that is, I mean, he's the most ridiculous character ever. His name is Tobias Funke.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He actually he calls himself an analrapist, which is, when you look at it written, it reads as anal rapist. But
right.
It's supposed to be like an analyst and therapist together.
Wow.
He decides that he really wants to join the Blue Man Group.
Oh my gosh. No, I have seen this.
Yeah.
It was years ago though.
Yeah. So he covers himself in blue paint and like walks around, and so people can tell where he's been because there are little splashes of blue
Yeah.
everywhere. And that is like, to your point, when people are tracing, that's the experience. That's, well, I've gotten that now on that thing, as much as if it were the blue paint that Tobias just like smacked on there with his blue hand.
Yeah, this can come up with emotional contamination as well, just so
Mm.
everyone knows. And um, it can look like someone who's emotionally contaminated, like that they say are triggered by their cousin who has a personality trait that they don't want to get,
Yep.
because personalities are contagious. Everybody knows
Definitely.
that.
Everybody knows that.
So they will avoid any places they've touched. This can even come up with like the fear of becoming depressed again, or anxious, getting more intrusive thoughts, right? Is like these locations that person felt or experienced high intensity of anxiety, is just avoiding those places and
Because it's got all
locations.
that paint all over it. You could see it. You don't want to
Yeah,
get anywhere
dirty.
near that. Nope.
Yeah.
Except for we want them to.
Yeah, we want to relearn new experiences in those locations. Mental review.
Let me think back into the span of my life and see if I did anything offensive, or let me
Mm-hmm.
review a moment to see if somebody was offended. I don't know why being offended is the thing that's coming up right now, but this actually comes up a lot in social anxiety too, since we were sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
nodding to the fact that people who don't have OCD, who have other anxiety disorders, depression, and people who have no disorders ruminate. So yeah, uh, I think mental review comes up in a lot in that context. Let me like go over what I said in that situation, what I did in that situation. Um, and then, yeah, but it could be with anything. Let me go back and review a false memory. Let me review that. Does it feel like it's a memory? And that's where we get into like a nice overlap with mental types of mental compulsions. That would be mental review slash emotional checking, right?
Yeah. I'm actually putting it in the notes because we're going to do a presentation in a couple of months on this. Okay.
We could get a Venn diagram going for this too.
True.
And that's
Emotional.
the thing.
Yeah,
Can I throw something in there that
please
we
do.
both mentioned um, during the conference, is that the categorization, we're going through these because it's really helpful, like when we go through different subtypes, to explain how we can get stuck, where we can get stuck. It helps people to feel less alone in their experience too. However, you don't need to memorize all of these. You don't need to make sure that you know exactly what type of mental compulsion you're doing any more than you need to know what type of OCD you have. And there is so much overlap that you could be doing several of these at any
Yeah.
given time.
Or even at the same time. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say that I feel the same about distorted thinking, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to say that something isn't catastrophizing and all or nothing, right? Like they
Yeah,
can have kind of bits and flavors of a bunch, or
they compound into
yeah.
one another. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, I know that we don't want to go
Yeah,
too deep into this stuff, but
yeah.
emotional
Well,
checking.
do you
Did
want
we
to
talk about?
maybe, well, because we actually just started talking about emotional checking in the context of mental review,
Right.
but maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe looking at any other things that
Um,
you have to. I love how you call it emotional temperature checking, because that's exactly what it is.
yeah. What's the weather inside today like? Huh? Oh, it's going to be a shitty day. And let me get the umbrella. Although
Siri,
I like rain.
what's
It's a sunny day.
what's the temperature currently inside my body?
Yeah.
Currently, you're very anxious and you're having lots of thoughts of murdering people. Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm feeling like murdery McMurderson. Nothing like a
McMurderson.
McMurder.
Yeah.
Yes,
And somebody just said that they do a mental checking as soon as they wake up, and this is kind of, I think, one of the things that happens with emotional checking um, is that you want to make sure that you're feeling better, and then when you're not, you get disappointed, and then you start to resist the feelings, and resisting feelings really doesn't work. Really doesn't work.
Doesn't feel good though, guys.
No.
I'm gonna just grab a few randoms that I think might. How about rumination?
Well, can I throw out a suggestion after? We could do rumination, but maybe after that we save for part 2 because I know we have questions, and maybe we can talk about some of the other elements of.
Well, this would be part 2, right? Because this mental review wasn't mental compulsions last week. What did we do last week?
We did substance contamination.
Oh, good Lord.
Have mercy. I know, brains. It's, yeah. So anyway, I'm just thinking maybe this would be a good delineating point, but.
Yes, agreed.
Can I talk about rumination anyway? Because I love talking about where it comes from. It's just my favorite. So gross.
Yeah, it is gross. I hate it.
Well, on both levels. So basically, the word rumination refers to a behavior done by a class of animals called ruminants. And what they like to do, cows, by the way, are one of these animals. They chew on their food. So you're chewing on your grass if you're a cow, and then you swallow it. And then you decide, you know what? I wasn't quite done chewing that. Let me regurgitate that and chew it some more. And so they do. They throw it up. Yeah.
They also have multiple stomachs, guys. So even though somebody with OCD and anxiety feels like we have multiple brains to process.
It does. That is the experience, right?
Yeah.
But so essentially, I bring that up because it is exactly what we're doing when we're ruminating in our minds. We are going over and over the same information again and again. And the second that we put it to rest, which anyone here who has engaged in rumination could probably attest to this, that you're like, okay, now I've got it. It's fine. I'm good. Got it. I'm cleaning my hands of this. That then a couple minutes later, it's like, what about this?
Have you thought about it this way?
But wait, it still could be messed up. So don't forget about that. And then you're back. And then you're back to the races. And then you throw up your food and you start chewing on it again. And of course, there actually is something called rumination disorder, which is about food. And people do this too. I don't mean to make light of that. And it's an issue. But yeah, it's really an issue to do that mentally because you never digest, quote unquote, digest your mental food, and you, therefore can never move on with your life.
Yeah.
Gross.
But
is there
is an anecdote.
An antidote?
Antidote. Thank you. Wow.
Hey.
Let me have some more coffee.
Do it. There is an antidote. There is a solution. Tell us about the solution, Kelley Franke.
Well, it would be called mindfulness and being a mental ninja.
Mental ninja. Yep.
I'm sure that 90% of the people watching this or listening to this later on despise that I just said that, but
it's true.
Because it's true, though. It's true. And if anyone was ever against it so much, it was me. And turns out, though, that it's so important because if we're not aware of what's going on internally, how could we ever be at any place able to jump in and stop and intervene. We wouldn't. It's just,
Nope.
it's a necessary thing. It has to happen. We have to be aware that we're having thoughts and this process of thinking, this active thinking, so we can go chewing my thoughts again, re-chewing.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be a mental ninja to be able to see that you had a thought, that you're
Yeah.
chewing, that you're having a feeling, that you're trying to get rid of your feelings. And but obviously in this context, right? Like
Yes.
we're really talking about the thoughts and the thinking. And that's, I think, the main difference between thought suppression and disengaging from thinking too, is that one is thoughts, which are passive, and one is thinking, which is active.
Yep. I love that.
Yeah. So mental
So,
ninja status. Tell me, so how, Kelley, how do I become a mental ninja? I can also, but I'm not trying to put this all on you, but I want to hear your thoughts on, because we
how do
always
you
have.
become a, well, should we say stay tuned till next time? No, I'm just kidding.
It's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, no. Well, I think we can expand more on it. I know I like to keep our things in the 30-minute range, but
Okay. Well, do we want to maybe leave people with
yeah, of
one
course.
thought?
Yeah.
Do we want to maybe try and
Yeah,
answer one other question too, or no? Do we gotta go? Because we
that's
haven't really answered any questions. I'm just aware of that.
okay. It's up to you.
Nope.
To you.
Why don't we do this instead of we will leave it as a cliffhanger so that we can look at the questions real quick and
Yeah.
answer one, and then please, if you have more questions, Kelley will have on her story next week a question box, or you can even email us if you like at purelyocd@gmail.com, and we will happily try to answer some of your questions. But let's see. So yeah, somebody asked about allowing the thoughts versus rumination, which I think is what we've already been talking about.
Right.
And let's see, I've been trying. So somebody said, I wanted to make sure to just review a couple of them, but what if, and this, I want to choose this one because it talks about thoughts and feelings, but it's a little bit difficult to understand too. So I think maybe we parse this apart and talk about how we think it would be helpful to conceptualize this for people. What if thoughts on loops? So what if thoughts are on loops? Try just allowing them and the emotions that they keep on. So the first thing that I want to say to this, and then I'll sort of let Kelley make some comments too, is that thoughts and feelings always keep coming until the end of your life, which is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that they're always going to be there 100% of the time. If you're allowing them, they'll tend to come and go. They'll come in and out of your consciousness. But it's actually a good sign. In fact, that's something that you say a lot. It's like, oh, good news, you have a functioning brain, or you have a functioning
your brain
system.
is online.
Congratulations.
Yes.
So I can appreciate that. And this is where mindfulness comes into play. We tend to judge that we don't want this experience, and approaching it from this non-judgmental acceptance perspective allows for us to be less disturbed when they arise and to just allow.
Yep.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you on this?
Well, I think, I think we need to just really acknowledge the fact that the loop, that the intrusive thought loop, it just keeps coming, it's just so relentless, it doesn't take breaks. And when next week, when we talk further about how to meet our thoughts when they're doing that in a helpful manner, that we are able to recognize that that's just a painful experience, and that anybody in the whole world who is getting these thoughts on loop would want them to be gone. And remember, these are very distressing thoughts. They're not just like a passing thought, like, oh, I have to go pee. It's not that, right? It's like your worst experience ever. So just acknowledging that it's there, having oodles of self-compassion, that's really important. And say, like, this is really difficult. And when we use this mindfulness trick, again, like call it a trick, it's not a trick, intervention, that it's going to be double down hard in comparison to even doing mental compulsions initially, because you're working against it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that probably doesn't make sense in this context yet, but
I think it does, though, just generally, if we even take it out of the context of acceptance, that when you are learning to flex the muscle of dropping the rumination and feeling those feelings, it's, first of all, it's not intuitive for anybody. And to your point, like, I loved what you said about the fact that, like, anyone would resist these thoughts. But yeah, I think it makes sense that it would be difficult to learn not to resist them, not only because culturally nobody talks about that, right? Like,
no,
nobody teaches you how to do that.
no,
Um, and also because it's tolerating discomfort it's hard.
yeah,
It's just ultimately a lot less hard than losing your life to mental compulsions. You know?
yeah, yeah,
Well, thank you, friend. We'll
yeah.
talk
Thank
more
you.
about this next time, and um, I hope everyone has a lovely week.
Yes,
All right. Arrivederci.
yes. Goodbye.
Goodbye.